The moment the truth started leaking out, Prince Harry didn't just lose his composure, he lost the illusion he had been desperately holding on to. Because the whispers weren't coming from enemies anymore, they were coming from inside the very world that built Meghan Markle. It all began like a fairy tale the world wanted to believe. A lonely prince haunted by grief and a glamorous Hollywood outsider who seemed to understand his pain better than anyone else ever could. Cameras captured smiles, carefully staged glances, and the kind of chemistry that made billions of people believe destiny itself had intervened. But behind those polished smiles, behind those carefully choreographed public moments, there was a completely different reality forming in silence. A reality so explosive that those closest to Harry reportedly began questioning everything they thought they knew about the woman who had entered his life like a sudden storm. According to whispers circulating in elite circles, whispers so persistent they refused to die, Meghan Markle wasn't simply discovered by fate, she had been moving strategically through a hidden network of power long before Harry ever appeared. And at the center of that network stood one man whose silence became louder than any confession: Markus Anderson. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't royalty, but insiders described him as something far more dangerous. He was the gatekeeper of Soho House, the secretive empire where the world's most powerful figures could disappear behind velvet ropes and become untouchable. This wasn't just a club, it was a sanctuary for secrets, a place where reputations could be built, protected, or destroyed without leaving a trace. And Meghan wasn't just another guest passing through. She was someone who understood its rules instinctively. She knew how to navigate rooms filled with billionaires, royalty, and celebrities. She knew when to speak and when to disappear. She knew how to become unforgettable without ever appearing obvious. And Markus Anderson saw that immediately. He didn't just open doors for her, he allegedly helped position her in the exact places she needed to be, introducing her to the right faces, embedding her deeper into circles that ordinary actresses could never access. To outsiders, Meghan was simply building her career, but insiders claimed something else was happening. They described her as someone who wasn't waiting for opportunity, she was engineering it. Toronto became her training ground. Soho House Toronto became her arena. And slowly, carefully, she became part of the invisible machinery that operated behind the scenes. People began noticing how effortlessly she blended into environments designed for the elite. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't overwhelmed. She thrived. She understood the currency of access. She understood the value of discretion. And most importantly, she understood how proximity to power could transform everything. By the time Prince Harry entered the picture in 2016, Meghan wasn't just an actress anymore. She was someone who had already learned how to exist in worlds where power operated quietly, where alliances formed without public knowledge, and where secrets were guarded like oxygen. Harry, on the other hand, was emotionally vulnerable, exhausted from decades of scrutiny, desperate for privacy, desperate for someone who could help him escape the suffocating weight of being Diana's son. When they met, it wasn't just chemistry, it was alignment. She offered him something he had been chasing his entire life: safety from exposure. She knew how to disappear. She knew how to create invisible spaces where he could exist without being watched, and that alone made her irresistible to him. But while Harry was falling deeper into that protected bubble, others were watching closely. Markus Anderson, the silent architect, remained in the background, observing the transformation unfold. He knew Meghan before the world did. He knew her before she became royalty. He knew her before her past began quietly vanishing from public view. And that's where the unease began. Because suddenly, people noticed changes. Old friendships faded. Old connections disappeared. Her social media presence was erased. Her blog, The Tig, vanished without explanation. It was as if entire chapters of her life were being sealed away, locked behind doors that no one could reopen. To Harry, it may have looked like sacrifice, like a woman giving up everything for love. But to those who had known her before, it looked like something else entirely. It looked like a reinvention. It looked deliberate. And then came the rumors that shattered the illusion completely. Stories of private parties. Stories of secret gatherings where the powerful behaved recklessly because they believed they were untouchable. Stories of nights where lines between privilege and scandal blurred dangerously. And in those stories, one name kept appearing. Not loudly, not officially, but persistently: Markus Anderson. He never spoke publicly. He never confirmed anything, but insiders suggested he knew everything. He had seen everything. He had been present during the transformation of Meghan Markle from ambitious actress to royal fiancé. And Harry began hearing those whispers too. Imagine the psychological impact. Imagine falling in love with someone while the world celebrates your union, only to slowly realize there are entire layers of their life you never never fully understood. Imagine realizing that the person you trusted completely had existed in environments filled with secrets so tightly controlled that truth itself became negotiable. Reports began circulating that Harry became increasingly isolated from his own support system. Old friends drifted away, family relationships fractured, and as the distance between him and his past widened, the only constant left was Meghan. Some insiders claimed he didn't even realize how much his world had changed until it was too late. And then came the moment that allegedly broke him. The moment Markus Anderson's name resurfaced in connection with revelations about Meghan's hidden past. Not publicly, not officially, but quietly, through the same elite channels that had built her. Those whispers carried weight because they came from people who had been there, people who had witnessed her rise firsthand. And suddenly, Harry wasn't just defending his wife against tabloids, he was confronting the possibility that there were truths buried deeper than he had ever imagined. Truths that couldn't be erased as easily as a social media account. Truths that couldn't be rewritten through public relations. Truths that existed in memories, in private conversations, in rooms where cameras were forbidden. For Harry, this wasn't just about reputation anymore. It was about reality. It was about understanding whether the love story he believed in had been genuine or whether it had been shaped by forces he never fully saw. And Markus Anderson, the silent gatekeeper, remained exactly where he had always been, in the shadows, watching, knowing, and saying nothing. The silence was what haunted him the most, because Markus Anderson never stepped forward to deny anything, never rushed to defend Meghan publicly, never tried to shut down the rumors that were now circling like predators around Harry's fragile emotional state. And that silence, that deliberate refusal to speak, became louder than any accusation ever could. Harry had spent his entire life surrounded by people who talked too much, who leaked too much, who exploited his pain for headlines, but Markus was different. He was the kind of man whose entire reputation was built on secrecy. He was known for protecting powerful people, for cleaning up situations before they could explode, for making sure scandals never saw daylight. And now, suddenly, the man who had helped shape Meghan's social world was watching from a distance as her royal identity stood at the center of the most dangerous whispers yet. Harry couldn't escape the questions creeping into his mind late at night, the questions that refused to disappear no matter how hard he tried to bury them. Had he really known her completely? Or had he only known the version of her that was carefully curated for him? Because once the whispers started, they didn't stop. They multiplied. People who had once been silent began speaking cautiously, never directly, never publicly, but enough to create a chilling pattern. They described Meghan as someone who understood power instinctively, someone who knew how to adapt to any environment, someone who could become exactly what a situation required. To Harry, that adaptability had once been mesmerizing. It had made her seem strong, resilient, unstoppable. But now, in the privacy of his thoughts, it began to feel unsettling, because adaptability could also mean concealment. It could mean survival. It could mean reinvention at any cost. And the more Harry reflected, the more he realized how quickly his life had transformed after she entered it. Within months, he had distanced himself from lifelong friends. He had fractured his relationship with his own brother. He had stepped away from the royal institution that had defined his identity since birth. At the time, he believed he was choosing freedom. He believed he was protecting the woman he loved. But now, those decisions began to feel heavier, more complicated, more permanent, because walking away was easy compared to confronting the possibility that everything had been more complex than he understood. And then came the emotional collapse insiders would later describe as one of the darkest periods of his life. Harry wasn't just battling public criticism, he was battling internal conflict. He was trapped between loyalty and doubt, between love and uncertainty, between the man he had always been and the man he was becoming. Meghan remained composed publicly, presenting strength, confidence, and unity. But those closest to Harry noticed subtle changes in him. His laughter became rarer. His energy faded. His once carefree spirit seemed replaced by something heavier, something burdened. Because Harry wasn't just defending his wife anymore. He was defending the reality he had built his entire future around. And if that reality cracked, everything would collapse with it. The most terrifying part wasn't knowing the truth. It was not knowing whether the truth had ever been fully visible. Markus Anderson remained a ghost in the background of this emotional storm. His name surfaced again and again in private conversations, always tied to Meghan's early social life, always linked to the exclusive world that had shaped her before royalty entered the picture. But Markus never betrayed her publicly. He never exposed her. He never confirmed anything. And that silence created its own kind of tension, because people began wondering why. Why remain silent if there was nothing to hide? Why avoid public defense if the accusations were false? Why watch quietly as Harry endured emotional isolation while the world questioned everything around him? To Harry, Markus represented something far more dangerous than an enemy. He represented knowledge. He represented the part of Meghan's life that existed before Harry became part of her story. He represented memories Harry could never access, experiences he could never witness, truths he could never fully verify. And that realization created a psychological prison more powerful than any physical cage. Because Harry had always trusted his instincts. He had always believed he could read people, understand their intentions, feel their authenticity. But now, for the first time, he questioned his own judgment. And questioning your judgment means questioning your reality. Publicly, Harry and Meghan continued presenting unity. They appeared together, spoke together, defended each other fiercely. But behind closed doors, insiders described an emotional complexity that couldn't be captured by cameras. Because once doubt enters a relationship, it never leaves quietly. It lingers, it whispers, it waits. And Harry, the prince who had once believed he found his escape from pain, now faced a different kind of uncertainty entirely. The irony was devastating. He had spent his entire life trying to escape secrets, trying to escape manipulation, trying to escape the emotional trauma created by hidden truths. And now, he found himself once again surrounded by shadows he couldn't fully illuminate. The same secrecy that had protected him in the beginning now became the thing that terrified him most. Because secrecy protects, but it also conceals. And concealment breeds doubt. Markus Anderson never needed to say a word. His existence alone represented everything Harry couldn't control, everything Harry couldn't undo, everything Harry couldn't fully understand. And in the end, that was the cruelest reality of all. Not betrayal, not exposure, but uncertainty. Because uncertainty destroys peace slowly, quietly, relentlessly. And as Harry stood between the life he had left behind and the life he had built with Meghan, one truth became impossible to ignore. The fairy tale the world believed in was never as simple as it seemed. Behind the royal titles, behind the public appearances, behind the declarations of love, there existed a hidden world built on access, secrecy, and transformation. And once Harry saw even a glimpse of that hidden world, he could never unsee it. The prince who had once searched for freedom now faced the terrifying realization that freedom and truth were not always the same thing. And somewhere in the shadows, Markus Anderson remained exactly what he had always been, the silent witness to a story that might never be fully told.